ink bottles and sprayed the class with them, shredded books and papers, tore pictures from the walls, upended the wastebasket, grabbed bags and books and threw them out of the smashed window. Within minutes, half the class was sheltering under desks, and Neville was swinging from the iron chandelier in the ceiling. "Come on now, round them up, they're only pixies," Lockhart shouted. He rolled up his sleeves, brandished his wand, and bellowed, "Pesky, pesky, pesternomi." It had absolutely no effect. One of the pixies seized his wand and threw it out of the window, too. Lockhart gulped and dived under his own desk, narrowly avoiding being squashed by Neville, who fell a second later as the chandelier gave way. The bell rang, and there was a mad rush toward the exit. In the relative calm that followed, Lockhart straightened up, caught sight of Harry, Ron, and Hermione, who were almost at the door, and said, I'll ask you three to just knit the rest of them back into their cage." He swept past them and shut the door quickly behind them. "Can you believe him?" roared Ron as one of the remaining pixies bit him painfully on the ear. "He just wants to give us some hands-on experience," said Hermione, immobilizing two pixies at once with a clever freezing charm and stuffing them back into the cave. "Hands-on?" said Harry, who was trying to grab a pixie dancing out of reach with its tongue out. "Hermione, he didn't have a clue what he was doing." "Rubbish," said Hermione. "You've read his books. Look at all those amazing things he's done." "He says he's done," Ron muttered. Chapter 7. Mudbloods and Murmurs. Harry spent a lot of time over the next few days dodging out of sight whenever he saw Gilderoy Lockhart coming down the corridor. Harder to avoid was Colin Creevey, who seemed to have memorized. He couldn't understand how he could have slept through the racket the birds were making. "Oliver," Harry croaked, "it's the crack of dawn." "Exactly," said Wood. He was a tall and burly sixth year, and, at the moment, his eyes were gleaming with a crazed enthusiasm. "It's part of our new training program. Come on, grab your broom, and let's go," said Wood heartily. "None of the other teams have started training yet. We're going to be first off the mark this year." Yawning and shivering slightly, Harry climbed out of bed and tried to find his Quidditch robes. "Good man," said Wood. "Meet you on the field in 15 minutes. When he'd found his scarlet team robes and pulled on his cloak for warmth, Harry scribbled a note to Ron explaining where he'd gone and went down the spiral staircase to the common room, his Nimbus 2000 on his shoulder. He had just reached the portrait hole when there was a clatter behind him and Colin Creevey came dashing down the spiral staircase, his camera swinging madly around his neck and something clutched in his hand. "I heard someone saying your name on the stairs, Harry. Look what I've got here. I've had it developed. I wanted to show you." Harry looked amusedly at the photograph Colin was brandishing under his nose. A moving, black and white Lockhart was tugging hard on an arm Harry recognized it as his own. He was pleased to see that his photographic self was putting up a good fight and refusing to be dragged into view. As Harry watched, Lockhart gave up and slumped, panting, against the white edge of the picture. "Will you sign it?" said Colin eagerly. "No," said Harry flatly, glancing around to check that the room was really deserted. "Sorry, Colin, I'm in a hurry. Quidditch practice." He climbed through the portrait hole. "Oh, wow! Wait for me! I've never watched a Quidditch game before." Colin scrambled through the hole after him. "It'll be really boring," Harry said quickly, but Colin ignored him, his face shining with excitement. "You are the youngest house player in 100 years, weren't you, Harry? Weren't you?" said Colin, trotting alongside him. "You must be brilliant. I've never flown. Is it easy? Is that your own broom? Is that the best one there is?" Harry didn't know how to get rid of him. It was like having an extremely talkative shadow. "I don't really understand Quidditch," said Ron breathlessly. "Is it true that there are 4 balls, and 2 of them fly around trying to knock people off their brooms?" "Yes," said Harry heavily, resigned to explaining the complicated rules of Quidditch. "They're called bludgers. There are 2 beaters on each team who carry clubs to beat the bludgers away from their side. Fred and George Weasley are the Gryffindor beaters." "And what are the other balls for?" Colin asked, tripping down a couple of steps because he was gazing open-mouthed at Harry. "Well, the quaffle, that's the biggest red one. It's the one that scores goals. 3 chasers on each team throw the quaffle to each other and try and get it to the goalposts at the end of the pitch. The 3 long poles with hoops on the end. And the 4th ball is the golden snitch, said Harry, and it's very small, very fast, and difficult to catch. That's what the seekers got to do, because a game of Quidditch doesn't end until the snitch has been caught. And whichever team's seeker gets the snitch earns his team an extra 150 points. And you're the Gryffindor seeker, aren't you? Said Colin in awe. Yes, said Harry as they left the castle and started across the dew-drenched grass. And there's the keeper, too. He guards the goalposts. That's it, really. But Colin didn't stop questioning Harry all the way down the sloping lawns to the Quidditch field, and Harry only shook him off when he reached the changing rooms. Colin called him after him in a piping voice. I'll go and get a good seat, Harry, and hurried off to the stands. The rest of the Gryffindor team were already in the changing room. Wood was the only person who looked truly awake. Fred and George were sitting, puffy-eyed and tousled-haired, next to 4-year Alicia Spinnet, who seemed to be nodding off against the wall behind her. Her fellow chasers, Katie Bell and Angelina Johnson, were yawning side by side opposite them. There you are, Harry. What kept you? Said Wood briskly. Now, I wanted a quick talk with you all before we actually get onto the field, because I spent the summer devising a whole new training program, which I really think will make all the difference. Wood was holding up a large diagram of a Quidditch field, on which were drawn many lines, arrows, and crosses in different colored inks. He took out his wand, tapped the board, and the arrows began to wiggle over the diagram like caterpillars. As Wood launched into a speech about his new tactics, Fred Weasley's head drooped right onto Alicia Spinnet's shoulder and he began to snore. The first board took nearly 20 minutes to explain, but there was another board under that, and a third under that. Harry sank into a stupor as Wood droned on and on. So, said Wood, at long last, jerking Harry with a wistful fantasy, but what he could be eating for breakfast at this very moment up in the castle. Is that clear? Any questions? I've got a question, Oliver, said Ron, who had woken with a start. Why couldn't you have told us all this yesterday when we were awake? Wood wasn't pleased. Now listen here, you lot, he said, glowering at them all. We should have won the Quidditch Cup last year. We're easily the best team, but unfortunately, owing to the circumstances beyond our control, Harry shifted guiltily to his seat. He had been unconscious in the hospital wing for the final match of the previous year, meaning that Gryffindor had been a player short and had suffered their worst defeat in 300 years. Wood took a moment to regain control of himself. Their last defeat was clearly still torturing him. So this year, we trained harder than ever before. Okay, let's go and put our new theories into practice, Wood shouted, seizing his broomstick and leading the way out of the locker rooms. Stiff-legged and still yawning, his team followed. They had been in the locker room so long that the sun was up completely now, although remnants of mist hung over the grass in the stadium. As Harry walked onto the field, he saw Ron and Hermione sitting in the stands. Aren't you finished yet? Called Ron incredulously. Haven't even started, said Harry, looking jealously at the toast and marmalade Ron and Hermione had brought out of the Great Hall. Wood's been teaching us new moves. He mounted his broomstick and kicked at the ground, soaring up into the air. The cool morning air whipped his face, waking him far more effectively than Wood's long talk. It felt wonderful to be back on the Quidditch field. He soared right around the stadium at full speed, racing with Fred and George. What's that funny clicking noise? Called Fred as they hurtled around the corner. Harry looked into the stands. Colin was sitting in one of the highest seats, his camera raised, taking picture after picture, the sound strangely magnified in the deserted stadium. Look that way, Harry! This way! He cried shrilly. Who's that? Said Fred. No idea, Harry lied, putting on a spurt of speed that took him as far away as possible from Colin. What's going on? Said Wood, frowning as he skimmed through the air toward them. Why is that first year taking pictures? I don't like that. He could be a Slytherin spy, trying to find out about our new training program. He's in Gryffindor, said Harry quickly. And the Slytherins don't need a spy, Oliver, said George. What makes you say that? Said Wood testily. Because they're here in person, said George, pointing. Several people in green robes were walking onto the field, broomsticks in their hands. I don't believe it, Wood hissed in outrage. I booked the field for today. We'll see about this. Wood shot toward the ground, landing rather harder than he meant to in his anger, staggering slightly as he dismounted. Harry, Fred, and George followed. Flint! Wood bellowed at the Slytherin captain. This is our practice time. We got up specially. You can clear off now. Marcus Flint was even larger than Wood. He had a look of trollish cunning on his face as he replied, Plenty of room for us all, Wood. Angelina, Alicia, and Katie had come over too. There were no girls on the Slytherin team, who stood shoulder to shoulder, facing the Gryffindors, leering to a man. But I booked the field, said Wood, positively spitting with rage. I booked it! Ah, said Flint, but I've got a specially signed note here from Professor Snape. I, Professor C. Snape, S. Snape, give the Slytherin team permission to practice today on the Quidditch field owing to the need to train their new Seeker. You got a new Seeker? Said Wood, distracted. Where? And from behind the 6 large figures before them came a 7th, smaller boy, smirking all over his pale, pointed face. It was Draco Malfoy. Aren't you Lucius Malfoy's son? Said Fred, looking at Malfoy with dislike. Funny you should mention Draco's father, said Flint as the whole Slytherin team smiled still more broadly. Let me show you the generous gift he's made to the Slytherin team. All 7 of them held out their broomsticks. 7 highly polished, brand new handles and 7 sets of fine gold lettering spelling the words Nimbus 2001 gleamed under the Gryffindors' noses in the early morning sun. Latest model. Only came out last month, said Flint carelessly, flicking a speck of dust from the end of his own. I believe it outstrips the old 2000 series by a considerable amount. As for the old clean sweeps, he smiled nastily at Fred and George, who were both clutching clean sweep 5s. Sweeps the board with them. None of the Gryffindor team could think of anything to say for a moment. Malfoy was smirking so broadly his cold eyes were reduced to slits. Oh, look, said Flint, a field invasion. Ron and Hermione were crossing the grass to see what was going on. What's happening? Ron asked Harry. Why aren't you playing? And what's he doing here? He was looking at Malfoy, taking in his Slytherin Quidditch robes. I'm the new Slytherin Seeker, Weasley, said Malfoy smugly. Everyone's just been admiring the brooms my father's bought our team. Ron gaped, open-mouthed, at the 7 superior broomsticks in front of him. Good, aren't they? Said Malfoy smoothly. But perhaps the Gryffindor team will be able to raise some gold and get new brooms too. You could raffle off those clean sweep 5s. I expect a museum would bid for them. The Slytherin team howled with laughter. At least no one on the Gryffindor team had to buy their way in, said Hermione sharply. They got in on pure talent. The smug look on Malfoy's face flickered. No one asked your opinion, you filthy little mudblood, he spat. Harry knew at once that Malfoy had done something really bad because there was an instant uproar at his words. Flint had to drive in front of Malfoy to stop Fred and George jumping on him. Alicia shrieked, How dare you! And Ron plunged his hand into his robes, pulling out his wand, yelling, You'll pay for that one, Malfoy, and pointed it furiously under Flint's arm at Malfoy's face. A loud bang echoed around the stadium, and a jet of green light shot out of the wrong end of Ron's wand, hitting him in the stomach and sending him reeling backward onto the grass. Ron! Ron, are you all right? Squealed Hermione. Ron opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he gave an almighty belch, and several slugs dribbled out of his mouth onto his lap. The Slytherin team were paralyzed with laughter. Flint was doubled up, hanging onto his new broomstick for support.
I need to get closer.
Malfoy was on all fours, banging in the ground with his fist. The Gryffindors were gathered around Ron, who kept belching large, glistening slugs. Nobody seemed to want to touch him. We better get him to Hagrid's. It's nearest, said Harry to Hermione, who nodded bravely, and the pair of them pulled Ron up by the arms. What happened, Harry? What happened? Is he ill? But you can cure him, can't you? Colin had run down from his seat, and was now dancing alongside them as they left the field. Ron gave a huge heave, and more slugs dribbled down his front. Oh, said Colin, fascinated and raising his camera. Can you hold him still, Harry? Get out of the way, Colin, said Harry angrily. He and Hermione supported Ron out of the stadium and across the grounds toward the edge of the forest. Nearly there, Ron, said Hermione as the gamekeeper's cabin came into view. You'll be all right in a minute. Almost there. They were within 20 feet of Hagrid's house when the front door opened, but it wasn't Hagrid who emerged. Gilderoy Lockhart, wearing robes of palest mauve today, came striding out. Quick, behind here, Harry hissed, dragging Ron behind a nearby bush. Hermione followed, somewhat reluctantly. It's a simple matter if you know what you're doing, Lockhart was saying loudly to Hagrid. If you need help, you know where I am. I'll let you have a copy of my book. I'm surprised you haven't already got one. I'll sign one tonight and send it over. Well, goodbye. And he strode away toward the castle. Harry waited till Lockhart was out of sight and pulled Ron out of the bush and up to Hagrid's front door. They knocked urgently. Hagrid appeared at once, looking very grumpy, but his expression brightened when he saw who it was. Been wondering when you'd come to see me. Come in. Thought you might have been Professor Lockhart back again. Harry and Hermione supported Ron over the threshold into the one-roomed cabin, which had an enormous bed in one corner, a fire crackling merrily in the other. Hagrid didn't seem perturbed by Ron's slug problem, which Harry hastily explained as he lowered Ron into a chair. Better out than in, he said cheerfully, plunging a large copper basin in front of him. Get him all up, Ron. I don't think there's anything to do except wait for it to stop, said Hermione anxiously, watching Ron bend over the basin. That's a difficult curse to work at the best of times, but with the broken wand? Hagrid was bustling around making them tea. His boarhound, Fang, was slobbering over Harry. When did Lockhart want with you, Hagrid? Harry asked, scratching Fang's ears. Giving me advice on getting kelpies out of a well, growled Hagrid, moving a half-plucked rooster off his scrap table and setting down the teapot. Like I don't know. Banging out about some banshee he banished. If one word of it was true, I'll eat my kettle. It was most unlike Hagrid to criticize a Hogwarts teacher, and Harry looked at him in surprise. Hermione, however, said in a voice somewhat higher than usual, I think you're being a bit unfair. Professor Dumbledore obviously thought he was the best man for the job. He was the only man for the job, said Hagrid, while offering them a plate of treacle fudge, while Ron coughed squelchly into his basin. And I mean the only one. Getting very difficult to find anyone for the Dark Arts job. People aren't too keen to take it on, see? They're starting to think it's jinxed. No one's lasted long for a while now. So tell me, said Hagrid, jerking his head at Ron, who is he trying to curse? Malfoy called Hermione something. It must have been really bad, because everyone went wild. It was bad, said Ron hoarsely, emerging over the tabletop looking pale and sweaty. Malfoy called her mudblood, Hagrid. Ron dived out of sight again as a fresh wave of slugs made their appearance. Hagrid looked outraged. He didn't, he growled at Hermione. He did, she said, but I don't know what it means. I could tell it was really rude, of course. It's about the most insulting thing he could think of. Yeah, gasped Ron, coming back up. Mudblood's a really foul name for someone who is muggle-born. You know, non-magic parents. There are some wizards, like Malfoy's family, who think they're better than everyone else because they're what people call pure blood. He gave a small burp, and a single slug fell into his outstretched hand. He threw it into the basin and continued. I mean, the rest of us know it doesn't make any difference at all. Look at Neville Longbottom. He's pure blood, and he can hardly stand a cauldron the right way up. And they haven't invented the spell our Hermione can do, said Hagrid proudly, making Hermione go a brilliant shade of magenta. It's a disgusting thing to call someone, said Ron, wiping his sweaty brow with a shaking hand. Dirty blood, see? Common blood. It's ridiculous. Most wizards these days are half-blood anyway. If we hadn't married muggles, we'd have died out. He retched and ducked out of sight again. Well, I don't blame you for trying to curse him, Ron, said Hagrid loudly over the thuds of more slugs hitting the basin. But maybe it was a good thing your wand backfired. Expect Lucius Malfoy would have come marching up to school if you'd cursed his son. At least you're not in trouble. Harry would have pointed out that trouble didn't come much worse than having slugs pouring out of your mouth, but he couldn't. Hagrid's treacle fudge had cemented his jaws together. "Harry," said Hagrid, abruptly, as though struck by some thought, "got a bone to pick with you. I've heard you've been giving out signed photos. How come I haven't got one?" Furious, Harry wrenched his teeth apart. "I have not been giving away signed photos," he said hotly. "If Lockhart's still spreading that around—" But then he saw that Hagrid was laughing. "I'm only joking," he said, patting Harry gently on the back and sending him face first into the table. "I know you hadn't really. I told Lockhart you didn't need to. You're more famous than him without trying." "But he didn't like that," said Harry, sitting up and rubbing his chin. "Don't think he did," said Hagrid, his eyes twinkling. "And then I told him I'd never read one of his books, and he decided to go. Treacle fudge, Ron?" he added as Ron reappeared. "No, thanks," said Ron weakly. "Better not risk it." "Come and see what I've been growing," said Hagrid as Harry and Hermione finished the last of their tea. In the small vegetable patch behind Hagrid's house were a dozen of the largest pumpkins Harry had ever seen. Each was the size of a large boulder. "Getting on well, aren't they?" said Hagrid happily. "For the Halloween feast. Should be big enough by then." "What have you been feeding them?" said Harry. Hagrid looked over his shoulder to check that they were alone. "Well, I've been giving them, a bit of help." Harry noticed Hagrid's flowery pink umbrella leaning against the back wall of the cabin. Harry had reason to believe before that now that this umbrella was not all it looked. In fact, he had the strong impression that Hagrid's old-school wand was concealed inside it. Hagrid wasn't supposed to use magic. He had been expelled from Hogwarts in his 3rd year, but Harry had never found out why. Any mention of the matter, and Hagrid would clear his throat loudly and become mysteriously deaf until the subject was changed. "An engorgement charm, I suppose?" said Hermione, halfway between disapproval and amusement. "Well, you've done a good job on them. That's what your little sister said Hagrid, nodding at Ron. "Met her just yesterday." Hagrid looked sideways at Harry, his beard twitching. "Said she was just looking around the grounds, but I reckon she was hoping she might run into someone at my house." He winked at Harry. "If you ask me, she wouldn't say no to a signed—" "Oh, shut up," said Harry. Ron snorted with laughter, and the ground was sprayed with slugs. "Watch it!" Harry roared, pulling Ron away from his precious pumpkins. It was nearly lunchtime, and as Harry had only had one bit of treacle fudge since dawn, he was keen to go back to school to eat. They said goodbye to Hagrid and walked back up to the castle, Ron coughing occasionally, but only bringing up 2 very small slugs. They had barely set foot in the cool entrance hall when a voice rang out. "There you are, Potter, Weasley." Professor McGonagall was walking toward them, looking stern. "You will both do your detentions this evening." "What are we doing, Professor?" said Ron, nervously suppressing a burp. "You will be polishing the silver in the trophy room with Mr. Filch," said Professor McGonagall. "And no magic, Weasley. Elbow grease." Ron gulped. Argus Filch, the caretaker, was loathed by every student in the school. "And you, Potter, will be helping Professor Lockhart answer his fan mail," said Professor McGonagall. "Oh, no, Professor, can I go into the trophy room, too?" said Harry desperately. "Certainly not," said Professor McGonagall, raising her eyebrows. "Professor Lockhart requested you particularly. 8 o'clock sharp, both of you." Harry and Ron slouched into the great hall in states of deepest gloom, Hermione behind them, wearing a you did break the school rules sort of expression. Harry didn't enjoy his shepherd's pie as much as he thought. Both he and Ron felt they'd got the worst deal. "Filch will have me there all night," said Ron heavily. "No magic? There must be about 100 cooks in that room. I'm no good at muggle cleaning." "I'd swap any time," said Harry hollowly. "I've had loads of practice with the Dursleys. Answering Lockhart's fan mail, he'll be a nightmare." Saturday afternoon seemed to melt away. In what seemed like no time, it was 5 minutes to 8, and Harry was dragging his feet along the second-floor corridor to Lockhart's office. He gritted his teeth and knocked. The door flew open at once. Lockhart beamed down at him. "Ah, here's the scalawag," he said. "Come in, Harry, come in." Shining brightly on the walls by the light of many candles were countless framed photographs of Lockhart. He had even signed a few of them. Another large pile lay on his desk. "You can address the envelopes," Lockhart told Harry. as though this was a huge treat. "This first one's to Gladius Gudgeon. Bless her, huge fan of mine." The minutes snailed by. Harry let Lockhart's voice wash over him, occasionally saying, and right, and yeah. Now and then he got a phrase like, "Fame's a fickle friend, Harry," or "Celebrity is as celebrity does, remember that." The candles burned lower and lower, making the light dance over the many moving faces of Lockhart watching him. Harry moved his aching hand over what felt like the 1,000th envelope, writing out Veronica Smeltley's address. It must be nearly time to leave, Harry thought miserably. Please let it be nearly time. And then he heard something. Something quite apart from the spitting of the dying candles and Lockhart's prattle about his fans. It was a voice. A voice to chill the bone marrow. A voice of breathtaking, ice-cold venom. "Come, come to me. Let me rip you. Let me tear you. Let me kill you." Harry gave a huge jump and a large lilac bolt appeared on Veronica Smeltley's street. "What?" he said loudly. "I know," said Lockhart. 6 solid months on the top of the bestseller list. Broke all records." "No," said Harry frantically. "That voice." "Sorry?" said Lockhart, looking puzzled. "What voice?" That voice that said, didn't you hear it?" Lockhart was looking at Harry in high astonishment. What are you talking about, Harry? Perhaps you're getting a little drowsy." "Great Scott, look at the time. We've been here nearly 4 hours. I'd never have believed it. The time's flown, hasn't it?" Harry didn't answer. He was straining his ears to hear the voice again, but there was no sound now except for Lockhart telling him he mustn't expect a treat like this every time he got attention. Feeling dazed, Harry left. It was so late that the Gryffindor common room was almost empty. Harry went straight up to the dormitory. Ron wasn't back yet. Harry pulled on his pajamas, got into bed, and waited. Half an hour later, Ron arrived, nursing his right arm and bringing a strong smell of polish into the darkened room. "My muscles have all seized up," he groaned, sinking on his bed. 14 times he made me buff up that Quidditch cup before he was satisfied. And then I had another slug attack all over a special award for services to the school. Took ages to get all the slime off. How is it with Lockhart? Keeping his voice low so as not to wake Neville, Dean, and Seamus, Harry told Ron exactly what he had heard. "And Lockhart said he couldn't hear it?" said Ron. Harry could see him frowning in the moonlight. Do you think he was lying? But I don't get it. Even someone invisible would have had to open the door." "I know," said Harry, lying back in his four-poster and staring at the canopy above him. "I don't get it either."
Chapter 8. The Death Day Party. October arrived, spreading a damp chill over the grounds and into the castle. Madame Pomfrey, the nurse, was kept busy by a sudden spate of colds among the staff and students. Her pepper-up potion worked instantly, though it left the drinker smoking at the ears for several hours afterward. Ginny Weasley, who had been looking pale, was bullied into taking some by Percy. The steam pouring from under her vivid hair gave the impression that her whole head was on fire. Raindrops the size of bullets thundered on the castle windows for days on end. The lake rose. The flower beds turned into muddy streams. Hagrid's pumpkins swelled to the size of garden sheds. Oliver Wood's enthusiasm for regular training sessions, however, was not dampened, which is why Harry was to be found, late one stormy Saturday afternoon, a few days before Halloween, returning to Gryffindor Tower, drenched to the skin and splattered with mud. Even aside from the rain and wind, it hadn't been a happy practice session. Fred and George, who had been spying on the Slytherin team, had seen for themselves the speed of those new Nimbus 2001s. They reported that the Slytherin team was no more than 7 greenish blurs, shooting through the air like missiles. As Harry squelched along the deserted corridor, he came across somebody who looked just as preoccupied as he was. Nearly headless Nick, the ghost of Gryffindor Tower, was staring morosely out of a window, muttering under his breath, "Don't fulfill their requirements. Half an inch is that, if that." "Hello, Nick," said Harry. "Hello," said nearly headless Nick. starting and looking round. He wore a dashing, plumed hat on his long, curly hair, and a tunic with a ruff which concealed the fact that his neck was almost completely severed. He was pale as smoke, and Harry could see right through him to the dark sky and torrential rain outside. "You look troubled, young Potter," said Nick, folding a transparent letter as he spoke and tucking it inside his doublet. "So do you," said Harry. "Ah," nearly headless Nick waved an elegant hand. "A matter of no importance. It's not as though I really wanted to join. Thought I'd applied, but apparently I don't fulfill requirements." In spite of his airy tone, there was a look of great bitterness on his face. "But you would think, wouldn't you," he erupted suddenly, pulling the letter back out of his pocket, "that getting hit 45 times in the neck with a blunt axe would qualify you to join the Headless Hunt?" "Oh, yes," said Harry, who was obviously supposed to agree. "I mean, nobody wishes more than I do that it had all been quick and clean, and my head had come off properly. I mean, it would have saved me a great deal of pain and ridicule." However, nearly headless Nick shook his letter open and read furiously. "We can only accept huntsmen whose heads have parted company with their bodies. You will appreciate that it would be impossible otherwise for members to participate in hunt activities such as horseback, head juggling, and head polo. It is with the greatest regret, therefore, that I must inform you that you do not fulfill our requirements. With very best wishes, Sir Patrick Delany Podmore." Fuming, nearly headless Nick stuffed the letter away. "Half an inch of skin and sinew holding my neck on, Harry. Most people would think that's good and beheaded, but oh no, it's not enough for Sir properly decapitated Podmore." Nearly headless Nick took several deep breaths and then said, in a far calmer tone, "So, what's bothering you? Anything I can do?" "No," said Harry, "not unless you know where we can get 7 free Nimbus 2001s for our match against Slit." The rest of Harry's sentence was drowned by a high-pitched mewling from somewhere near his ankles. He looked down and found himself gazing into a pair of lamp-like yellow eyes. It was Mrs. Norris, the skeletal gray cat who was used by the caretaker, Argus Filch, as a sort of deputy in his endless battle against students. "You'd better get out of here, Harry," said Nick quickly. "Filch isn't in a good mood. He's got the flu, and some third years accidentally plastered frog brains all over the ceiling in Dungeon 5. He's been cleaning all morning, and if he sees you dripping mud all over the place—" "Right," said Harry, backing away from the accusing stare of Mrs. Norris, but not quickly enough. Drawn to the spot by the mysterious power that seemed to connect him with his foul cat, Argus Filch burst suddenly through a tapestry to Harry's right, wheezing and looking wildly about for the rule breaker. There was a thick tartan scarf bound around his head, and his nose was unusually purple. "Filth!" he shouted, his jowls a-quiver, his eyes popping alarmingly as he pointed at the muddy puddle that had dripped from Harry's Quidditch robes. "Mess and muck everywhere! I've had enough of it, I tell you! Follow me, Potter!" So Harry waved a gloomy goodbye to nearly headless Nick and followed Filch back downstairs. Doubling the number of muddy footprints on the floor. Harry had never been inside Filch's office before. It was a place most students avoided. The room was dingy and windowless, lit by a single oil lamp dangling from the low ceiling. A faint smell of fried fish lingered about the place. Wooden filing cabinets stood around the walls. From their labels, Harry could see that they contained details of every pupil Filch had ever punished. Fred and George Weasley had an entire drawer to themselves. A highly polished collection of chains and mangles hung on the wall behind Filch's desk. It was common knowledge that he was always begging Dumbledore to let him suspend students by their ankles from the ceiling. Filch grabbed a quill from a pot on his desk and began shuffling around looking for parchment. "Dung,"
he muttered fiercely. Great sizzling dragon bogies, frog brains, rat intestines. I've had enough of it. Make an example. Where's the form? Yes. He retrieved a large roll of parchment from his desk drawer and stretched out in front of him, dripping his long black quill into the inkpot. Name? Harry Potter. Crime? It was only a bit of mud, said Harry. It's only a bit of mud to you, boy, but to me it's an extra hour scrubbing, shouted Filch, a drip shivering unpleasantly at the end of his bulbous nose. Crime? Befouling the castle, suggested sentence. Dabbing at his streaming nose, Filch squinted unpleasantly at Harry, who waited with bated breath for his sentence to fall. But as Filch lowered his quill, there was a great bang on the ceiling of the office, which made the oil lamp rattle. Peeves! Filch roared, flinging down his quill in a transport of rage. I'll have you this time! I'll have you! Without a backward glance at Harry, Filch ran flat-footed from the office, Mrs. Norris streaking alongside him. Peeves was a school poltergeist, a grinning, airborne menace who lived to cause havoc and distress. Harry didn't much like Peeves, but couldn't help feeling grateful for his timing. Hopefully, whatever Peeves had done, and it sounded as though he'd wrecked something very big this time, would distract Filch from Harry. Thinking that he should probably wait for Filch to come back, Harry sank into a moth-eaten chair next to the desk. There was only one thing on it apart from his half-completed form. A large, glossy purple envelope with silver lettering on the front. With a quick glance at the door to check that Filch wasn't on his way, Harry picked up the envelope and read, Quick Spell, Correspondence Course in Beginner's Magic. Intrigued, Harry flicked the envelope open and pulled out the sheaf of parchment inside. More curly silver writing on the front page said, Feel out of step in the world of modern magic? Find yourself making excuses not to perform simple spells? Ever been taunted for your woeful wand work? There's an answer. Quick Spell is an all-new, fail-safe, quick result, easy-learned course. Hundreds of witches and wizards have been benefited from the Quick Spell method. Madame Z. Nettles of Topsham writes, I had no memory for incantations, and my potions were a family joke. Now, after a Quick Spell course, I am the center of attention at parties, and friends beg for the recipe of my scintillation solution. Warlock DJ Prod of Didsbury says, My wife used to sneer at my feeble charms, but 1 month into your fabulous quick spell course, and I succeeded in turning her into a yak. Thank you, Quick Spell. Fascinated, Harry thumbed through the rest of the envelope's contents. Why on earth did Filch want a Quick Spell course? Did this mean he wasn't a proper wizard? Harry was still reading Lesson 1, Holding Your Wand, Some Useful Tips, when shuffling footsteps outside told him Filch was coming back. Stuffing the parchment back into the envelope, Harry threw back onto the desk just as the door opened. Filch was looking triumphant. That vanishing cabinet was extremely valuable, he was saying gleefully to Mrs. Norris. We'll have Peeves out of this time, my sweet. His eyes fell on Harry and then darted to the Quick Spell envelope, which, Harry realized too late, was lying 2 feet away from where it had started. Filch's pasty face went brick red. Harry braced himself for a tidal wave of fury. Filch hobbled across to his desk, snatched up the envelope, and threw it into a drawer. Did you read? He sputtered. No, Harry lied quickly. Filch's knobby hands were twisting together. If I thought you'd read my private, not that it's mine, for a friend, be that as it may. However, Harry was still staring at him, alarmed. Filch had never looked madder. His eyes were popping. A tick was going on in one of his pouchy cheeks, and the tartan scarf didn't help. Very well, go, and don't breathe a word. Not that, however, if you didn't read. Go on. I have to read Peeves' report. Go. Amazed at his luck, Harry sped out of the office, up the corridor, and back upstairs. To escape from Filch's office without punishing punishment was probably some kind of school record. Harry! Harry! Did it work? Nearly headless Nick came gliding out of a classroom. Behind him, Harry could see the record of a large black and gold cabinet that appeared to have been dropped from a great height. I persuaded Peeves to crash it right over Filch's office, said Nick eagerly, though it might distract him. Was that you? Said Harry gratefully. Yeah, it worked. I didn't ever get detention. Thanks, Nick. They set off up the corridor together. Nearly headless Nick, Harry noticed, was still holding Sir Patrick's rejection letter. I wish there was something I could do for you about the headless hunt, Harry said. Nearly headless Nick stopped in his tracks, and Harry walked right through him. He wished he hadn't. It was like stepping through an icy shower. But there is something you could do for me, said Nick excitedly. Harry, would I be asking too much? But no, you wouldn't want. What is it? Said Harry. Well, this Halloween will be my 500th death day, said nearly headless Nick, drawing himself up and looking dignified. Oh, said Harry, not sure whether he should look sorry or happy about this. Right. I'm holding a party down in one of the roomier dungeons. Friends will be coming from all over the country. It would be such an honor if you would attend. Mr. Weasley and Miss Granger would be most welcome too, of course, but I dare say you'd rather go to the school feast. He watched Harry on tender hooks. No, said Harry quickly. I'll come. My dear boy, Harry Potter at my death day party. And, he hesitated, looking excited. Do you think he could possibly mention to Sir Patrick how very frightened and impressive you find me? Of course, said Harry. Nearly headless Nick beamed at him. A death day party? Said Hermione keenly when Harry had changed at last and joined her around in the common room. I bet there aren't many living people who can say they've been to one of those. It'll be fascinating. Why would anyone want to celebrate the day they died? Said Ron, who was halfway through his potions homework and grumpy. Sounds dead depressing to me. Rain was still lashing the windows, which was now inky black, but inside all looked bright and cheerful. A firelight glowed over the countless squashy armchairs where people sat reading, talking, doing homework, or, in the case of Fred and George Weasley, trying to find out what would happen if you fed a filibuster firework to a salamander. Fred had rescued the brilliant orange, fire-dwelling lizard from a Care of Magical Creatures class, and it was now smoldering gently on a table surrounded by a knot of curious people. Harry was at the point of telling Ron and Hermione about Filch and the Quickspell course when the salamander suddenly whizzed into the air, emitting loud sparks and bangs as it whirled wildly around the room. The sight of Percy bellowing himself hoarse at Fred and George, the spectacular display of tangerine stores showering from the salamander's mouth, and its escape into the fire, with accompanying explosions, drove both Filch and the Quickspell envelope from Harry's mind. By the time Halloween arrived, Harry was regretting his rash promise to go to the Death Day party. The rest of the school was happily anticipating their Halloween feast. The Great Hall had been decorated with the usual live bats. Hagrid's vast pumpkins had been carved into lanterns large enough for 3 men to sit in, and there were rumors that Dumbledore had booked a troupe of dancing skeletons for the entertainment. A promise is a promise, Hermione reminded Harry bossily. You said you'd go to the Death Day party. So at 7 o'clock, Harry, Ron, and Hermione walked straight past the doorway to the packed Great Hall, which was glittering invitingly with gold plates and candles, and directed their steps instead toward the dungeons. The passageway leading to nearly headless Nick's party had been lined with candles too, though the effect was far more cheerful. These were long, thin, jet-black tapers, all burning bright blue, casting a dim, ghostly light even over their own living faces. The temperature dropped with every step they took. As Harry shivered and drew his robes tightly around him, he heard what sounded like 1,000 fingernails scraping an enormous blackboard. Is that supposed to be music? Ron whispered. They turned a corner and saw nearly headless Nick standing at a doorway hung with black velvet drapes. My dear friends, he said mournfully, welcome, welcome. So pleased you could come. He swept off his plumed hat and bowed them inside. It was an incredible sight. The dungeon was full of hundreds of pearly white, translucent people, mostly drifting around a crowded dance floor, waltzing to the dreadful, quavering sound of 30 musical saws, played by an orchestra on a raised, black-draped platform. A chandelier overhead played blazed midnight blue with 1,000 more black candles. Their breath rose in a mist before them. It was like stepping into a freezer. "Shall we have a look around?" Harry suggested, wanting to warm up his feet. "Careful not to walk through anyone," said Ron nervously, and they set off around the edge of the dance floor. They passed a group of gloomy nuns, a ragged man wearing chains, and the fat friar, a cheerful Hufflepuff ghost, who was talking to a knight with an arrow sticking out of his head. Harry wasn't surprised to see that the Bloody Baron, a gaunt, staring Slytherin ghost covered in silver bloodstains, was being given a wide berth by the other ghosts. "Oh no," said Hermione, stopping abruptly. Turn back. I don't want to talk to Moaning Myrtle." "Who?" said Harry as they backtracked quickly. "She haunts one of the toilets in the girls' bathroom on the first floor," said Hermione. "She haunts a toilet?" "Yes. It's been out of order all year because she keeps having tantrums and flooding the place. I never went in there anyway, if I could avoid it. It's awful trying to have a pee while her wailing at you." "Look, food!" said Ron. On the other side of the dungeon was a long table, also covered and split in black velvet. They approached it eagerly, but next moment had stopped in their tracks, horrified. The smell was quite disgusting. Large, rotten fish were laid out on handsome silver platters. Cakes, burned charcoal black, were heaped on salvers. There was a great maggoty haggis, a slab of cheese covered in furry green mold, and, in pride of place, an enormous grey cake in the shape of a tombstone, with tar-like icing forming the words, "Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Porpington died 31st October 1492. Harry watched, amazed, as a portly ghost approached the table, crouched low, and walked through it. His mouth held high so that it passed through one of the stinking salmon. "Can you taste it if you walk through it?" Harry asked him. "Almost," said the ghost sadly, and he drifted away. "I expect they've let it rot to give it a stronger flavor," said Hermione inaudibly, pinching her nose and leaning closer to look at the putrid haggis. Can we move?" "I feel sick," said Ron. They had barely turned around, however, when a little man swooped suddenly from under the table and came to a halt in midair before them. "Hello, Peeves," said Harry cautiously. Unlike the ghosts around them, Peeves the Poltergeist was the very reverse of pale and transparent. He was wearing a bright orange party hat, a revolving bow tie, and a broad grin on his wide, wicked face. "Nibbles?" he said sweetly, offering them a bowl of peanuts covered in fungus. "No thanks," said Hermione. "Heard you talking about poor Myrtle," said Peeves, his eyes dancing. "Rude you was about poor Myrtle." He took a deep breath and bellowed, "Oi, Myrtle!" "Oh no, Peeves, don't tell her what I said. She'll be really upset," Hermione whispered frantically. "I didn't mean it. I don't mind her. Hello, Myrtle." The squat ghost of a girl had glided over. She had the gloomiest face Harry had ever seen, half hidden behind lank hair and thick, pearly spectacles. "What?" she said sulkily. "How are you, Myrtle?" said Hermione in a falsely bright voice. "It's nice to see you out of the toilet." Myrtle sniffed. "Miss Granger was talking about you," said Peeves slyly in Myrtle's ear. "Just saying. How nice you look tonight," said Hermione, glaring at Peeves. Myrtle eyed Hermione suspiciously. "You're making fun of me," she said, silver tears welling rapidly in her small, see-through eyes. "No, honestly, didn't I just say how nice Myrtle's looking?" said Hermione, nudging Harry and Ron painfully in the ribs. "Oh yeah, she did. Don't lie to me," Myrtle gasped, tears now flooding down her face, while Peeves chuckled happily over her shoulder. "Do you think I don't know what people call me behind my back? Fat Myrtle, ugly Myrtle, miserable, moaning, moping Myrtle?" "You've forgotten Pimply," Peeves hissed in her ear. Moaning Myrtle burst into anguished sobs and fled from the dungeon. Peeves shot after her, pelting her with moldy peanuts, yelling, "Pimply, Pimply!" "Oh dear," said Hermione sadly. Nearly Headless Nick now drifted toward them through the crowd. "Enjoying yourselves?" "Oh yes," they lied. "Not a bad turnout," said nearly headless Nick proudly. A wailing widow came all the way up from Kent. It's nearly time for my speech. I'd better go and warn the orchestra. The orchestra, however, stopped playing at that very moment. They, and everyone else in the dungeon, fell silent, looking around in excitement, as a haunting horn sounded.
I'm gonna jump on the tree.
No,
Why?
because I'm making a video. Now blow away. Oh, here we go, said nearly headless Nick bitterly. Through the dungeon wall burst a dozen ghost horses, each ridden by a headless horseman. The assembly clapped wildly. Harry started to clap too, but stopped quickly at the sight of Nick's face. The horses galloped into the middle of the dance floor and halted, rearing and plunging. At the front of the back was a large ghost who held his bearded head under his arm, from which position he was blowing the horn. The ghost leapt down, lifted his head high in the air so he could see over the crowd. Everyone laughed, and strode over to nearly headless Nick, squashing his head back onto his neck. "Nick!" he roared. "How are you? Head still hanging in there?" He gave a hearty guffaw and clapped nearly headless Nick on the shoulder. "Welcome, Patrick," said Nick stiffly. "Live uns," said Sir Patrick, spotting Harry, Ron, and Hermione and giving a huge, fake jump of astonishment so that his head fell off again. The crowd howled with laughter. "Very amusing," said nearly headless Nick darkly. "Don't mind Nick," shouted Sir Patrick's head from the floor. "Still upset we won't let him join the hunt, but I mean to say, look at the fellow." "I think," said Harry hurriedly, at a meaningful look from Nick, "Nick's very frightened and, ha!" yelled Sir Patrick's head. "Bet he asked you to say that." "If I could have anyone's attention, it's time for my speech," said nearly headless Nick loudly, striding toward the podium and climbing into an icy blue spotlight. "My late lamented lords, ladies, and gentlemen, it is my great sorrow," but nobody heard much more. Sir Patrick and the rest of the headless hunt had just started a game of head hockey, and the crowd was turning to watch. Nearly headless Nick tried vainly to recapture his audience, but gave up as Sir Patrick's head went sailing past him to loud cheers. Harry was very cold by now, not to mention hungry. "I can't stand much more of this," Ron muttered, his teeth chattering, as the orchestra ground back into action and the ghosts swept back onto the dance floor. "Let's go," Harry agreed. They backed toward the door, nodding and beaming at anyone who looked at them, and a minute later, were hurrying back up the passageway full of black candles. Pudding might not be finished yet," said Ron hopefully, leading the way toward the steps to the entrance hall. And then Harry heard it. Rip. Tear. Kill. It was the same voice, the same cold, murderous voice he had heard in Lockhart's office. He mumbled to a halt, clutching at the stone wall, listening with all his might, looking around, squinting up and down the dimly lit passageway. "Harry, what are you—" "It's that voice again. Shut up a minute." "So hungry. For so long." "Listen," said Harry urgently, and Ron and Hermione froze, watching him. "Kill. Time to kill." The voice was growing fainter. Harry was sure it was moving away, moving upward. A mixture of fear and excitement gripped him as they stared at the dark ceiling. How could it be moving upward? Was it a phantom, to whom stone ceilings didn't matter? "This way," he shouted, and he began to run, up the stairs, into the entrance hall. It was no good hoping to hear anything here, and the babble of talk from the Halloween feast was echoing out of the grey hall. Harry sprinted up the marble staircase to the first floor, Ron and Hermione clattering behind him. "Harry, what are we—" "Shh!" Harry strained his ears. Distantly, from the floor above, and growing fainter still, he heard the voice. "I smell blood. I smell blood." His stomach lurched. "It's going to kill someone!" he shouted, and ignoring Ron's and Hermione's bewildered faces, he ran up the next flight of the steps three at a time, trying to listen over his own pounding footsteps. Harry hurtled around the whole of the second floor, Ron and Hermione panting behind him, not stopping until they turned the corner into the last deserted passage. "Harry, what was that all about?" said Ron, wiping sweat off his face.
No talk.
"I couldn't hear anything." but Hermione gave a sudden gasp, pointing down the corridor. Look! Something was shining on the wall ahead. They approached slowly, squinting through the darkness. Foot-high words had been dabbed on the wall between two windows, shimmering in the light cast by the flaming torches. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the Higher, beware. What's that thing hanging underneath? Said Ron, a slight quiver in his voice. As they edged nearer, Harry almost slipped. There was a large puddle of water on the floor. Ron and Hermione grabbed him, and they inched toward the message, eyes fixed on a dark shadow beneath it. All three of them realized what it was at once, and leapt back with a splash. Mrs. Norris, the caretaker's cat, was hanging by her tail from the torch bracket. She was stiff as a board, her eyes wide and staring. For a few seconds, they didn't move. Then Ron said, "Let's get out of here." "Shouldn't we try and help?" Harry began awkwardly. "Trust me," said Ron. "We don't want to be found here." But it was too late. A rumble, as though it was distant thunder, told them that the feast had just ended. From either end of the corridor where they stood came the sound of hundreds of feet climbing the stairs, and the loud, happy talk of well-fed people. Next moment, students were crashing into the passage from both ends. The chatter, the bustle, the noise died suddenly as the people in front spotted the hanging cat. Harry, Ron, and Hermione stood alone, in the middle of the corridor. A silence fell among the mass of students pressing forward to see the grisly sight. Then someone shouted into the quiet, "Enemies of the Higher, beware! You'll be next, mudbloods!" It was Draco Malfoy. He had pushed to the front of the crowd, his cold eyes alive, his usually bloodless face flushed, as he grinned at the sight of the hanging, immobile cat. Chapter 9. The Writing on the Wall. "What's going on here? What's going on?" Attracted no doubt by Malfoy's shout, Argus Filch came shouldering his way through the crowd. Then he saw Mrs. Norris and fell back, clutching his face in horror. "My cat! My cat! What's happened to Mrs. Norris?" he shrieked, and his popping eyes fell on Harry. "You!" he screeched. You've murdered my cat! You've killed her! I'll kill you! Argus!" Dumbledore had arrived on the scene, followed by a number of other teachers. In seconds, he had swept past Harry, Ron, and Hermione and detached Mrs. Norris from the torch bracket. "Come with me, Argus," he said to Filch. "You too, Mr. Potter, Mr. Weasley, Miss Granger." Lockhart stepped forward eagerly. "My office is nearest, Headmaster, just upstairs. Please feel free." "Thank you, Gilderoy," said Dumbledore. The silent crowd parted to let them pass. Lockhart, looking excited and important, hurried after Dumbledore. So did Professors McGonagall and Snape. As they entered Lockhart's darkened office, there was a flurry of movement across the walls. Harry saw several of the Lockharts and the pitchers dodging out of sight, their hair in rollers. The real Lockhart lit the candles on his desk and stood back. Dumbledore laid Mrs. Norris on the polished surface and began to examine her. Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged tense looks and sank into chairs outside the pool of candlelight, watching. The tip of Dumbledore's long, crooked nose was barely an inch from Mrs. Norris's fur. He was looking at her closely through his half-moon spectacles, his long fingers gently prodding and poking. Professor McGonagall was bent almost as close, her eyes narrowed. Snape loomed behind them, half in shadow, wearing a most peculiar expression. It was as though he was trying hard not to smile, and Lockhart was hovering around all of them, making suggestions. It was definitely a curse that killed her. Probably the Transmogrifian torture. I've seen it used many times. So unlucky I wasn't there. I know the very counter curse that would have saved her. Lockhart's comments were punctured by Filch's dry, racking sobs. He was lumped in a chair by the desk, unable to look at Mrs. Norris, his face in his hands. Much as he detested Filch, Harry couldn't help feeling a bit sorry for him, though not nearly as sorry as he felt for himself. If Dumbledore believed Filch, he would be expelled for sure. Dumbledore was now muttering strange words under his breath and tapping Mrs. Norris with his wand, but nothing happened. She continued to look as though she had been recently stuffed. I remember something very similar happening in Dagugo, said Lockhart. A series of attacks. The full story is in my autobiography. I was able to provide the townsfolk with various amulets, which cleared the matter up at once. Photographs of Lockhart on the walls were all nodding in agreement as he talked. One of them had forgotten to remove his hairnet. At last Dumbledore straightened up. "She's not dead, Argus," he said softly. Lockhart stopped abruptly in the middle of counting the number of murders he had prevented. "Not dead?" choked Filch, looking through his fingers at Mrs. Norris. "But why is she all stiff and frozen?" "She has been petrified," said Dumbledore. "Ah, I thought so," said Lockhart, "but how, I cannot say." "Ask him!" shrieked Filch, turning his blotched and tear-stained face to Harry. "No second year could have done this," said Dumbledore firmly. "It would take dark magic of the most advanced." "He did it! He did it!" Filch spat, his pouchy face purpling. "You saw what he wrote on the wall? He found, in my office, he knows I'm a... Filch's face worked horribly. "He knows I'm a squib," he finished. "I never touched Mrs. Norris," Harry said loudly, uncomfortably aware of everyone looking at him, including all the Lockharts on the walls. "And I don't even know what a squib is." "Rubbish!" snarled Filch. "He saw my quick spell letter." "If I might speak, Headmaster," said Snape from the shadows, and Harry's sense of foreboding increased. He was sure nothing Snape had to say was going to do him any good. "Potter and his friends may have simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time," he said, a slight sneer curling his mouth as though he doubted it. "But we do have a set of suspicious circumstances here. Why was he in the upstairs corridor at all? Why wasn't he at the Halloween feast?" Harry, Ron, and Hermione all launched into an explanation about the Death Day party. "There were hundreds of ghosts. They'll tell you we were there. And why not join the feast afterward?" said Snape, his black eyes glittering in the candlelight. "Why go up to that corridor?" Ron and Hermione looked at Harry. Because, Harry said, his heart thumping very fast. Something told him it would sound very far-fetched if he told them he had been there by a bodiless voice no one but he could hear. "Because we were tired and wanted to go to bed," he said. "Without any supper?" said Snape, a triumphant smile flickering across his gaunt face. "I didn't think ghosts provided food fit for living people at their parties." "We weren't hungry," said Ron loudly as his stomach gave a huge rumble. Snape's nasty smile widened. "I suggest, Headmaster, that Potter's not being entirely truthful," he said. "It might be a good idea if he were deprived of certain privileges until he is ready to tell us the whole story. I personally feel he should be taken off the Gryffindor Quidditch team until he is ready to be honest." "Really, Severus?" said Professor McGonagall sharply. "I see no reason to stop the boy playing Quidditch. This cat wasn't hit over the head with a broomstick. There's no evidence at all that Potter has done anything wrong." Dumbledore was giving Harry a searching look. His twinkling light blue gaze made Harry feel as though he was being X-rayed. "Innocent until proven guilty, Severus," he said firmly. Snape looked furious. So did Filch. "My cat has been petrified!" he shrieked, his eyes popping. "I want to see some punishment." "We will be able to cure her, Argus," said Dumbledore patiently. "Professor Sprout recently managed to procure some mandrakes. As soon as they have reached their full size, I will have a potion made that will revive Mrs. Norris." "I'll make it," Lockhart butted in. "I must have done it 100 times. I could whip up a mandrake restorative draught in my sleep." "Excuse me," said Snape icily, "but I believe I'm the potions master at this school." There was a very awkward pause. "You may go," Dumbledore said to Harry, Ron, and Hermione. They went, as quickly as they could without actually running. When they were a floor up from Lockhart's office, they turned into an empty classroom and closed the door quietly behind them. Harry squinted at his friends' darkened faces. "Do you think I should have told them about that voice I heard?" "No," said Ron, without hesitation. "Hearing voices no one else can hear isn't a good sign, even in the wizarding world." Something in Ron's voice made Harry ask, "You do believe me, don't you?" "Of course I do," said Ron quickly, "but you must admit it's weird." "I know it's weird," said Harry. "The whole thing's weird. What was that writing on the wall about? The chamber has been opened. What's that supposed to mean?" "You know, it rings a sort of bell," said Ron slowly. "I think someone told me a story about a secret chamber at Hogwarts once. Might have been Bill. And what on earth is squib?" said Harry. To his surprise, Ron stifled a snigger. Well, it's not funny, really. But as it's Filch, he said, a squib is someone who was born into a wizarding family but hasn't got any magic powers.